Hey guys, it's Daniel. Welcome back.
The story of Nirvana from before they were famous is often overlooked, as is the case with almost every famous band. A lot of people tend to be more interested in the famous era of the bands they admire rather than from before they were big. While of course there's nothing wrong with having a favorite era of a band, I do think it's important not to overlook the period of time in which a band is developing and growing up. With this video, that's exactly what I'll be doing with Nirvana. In my opinion, the best book out there in terms of the early history of Nirvana is Entertain Us: The Rise of Nirvana by Gillian G. Garr. I actually bumped into Gillian in Kurt Cobain's hometown Aberdeen while I was interviewing Aaron Burckhard, Nirvana's original drummer. I'll be including the full interview with Aaron Burckhard later in this video. But first I want to read to you a part of Entertain Us where the early history of Nirvana's story is explored in great detail. If you're a fan of Nirvana and you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe for more, lots more to come. All the videos here are original, done by myself. Quote, Kurt had long yearned to be in a rock band. It was a dream he'd had since he was a child, later telling his biographer Michael Azerrad that at age 7, he thought, quote, for sure I could be a rock star. I thought the US was about as big as my backyard, so it would be no problem to drive all over the place and play in a rock band and be on the cover of magazines and stuff. Aberdeen, Washington seemed an unlikely place for such dreams to come true. It had been founded in 1884, when logging was the predominant industry there, and in the adjacent towns of Hoquiam and Cosmopolis, all of which were nestled around a series of rivers that fed into Grays Harbor. Aberdeen's population peaked in 1930 at just below 22,000, but the Great Depression hit the area hard and the number of residents dropped steadily over the subsequent decades. Aberdeen still had a population of 19,000 when Cobain was born there on February 20th, 1967, but the timber industry was falling into decline, and the town's boom days were long since over. A half-hour's drive from the Pacific coast and 100 miles from the nearest large city, Seattle, also the largest city in Washington state, life in Aberdeen, a town just 3 miles long and 4 miles wide, was isolated. It's just a little bit behind the times, says Jeff Burlingame, who grew up in Aberdeen and was later a journalist for the local paper, The Daily World. It was a small-town life, pretty much. There were a few things you could do. You could be real athletic, you could be creative and shunned, or you could be into music and shunned. It was a slower-paced life, and there just wasn't as much culture. Kurt was one of those guys that was looking for culture, and it just wasn't there. Aberdeen was a place stuck in the past rather than looking forward to the future. As a child, Kurt nonetheless stood out amongst others his age due to his keen interest in art and music, something his parents, Don and Wendy, encouraged. By the age of 2, a children's harmonica and drum were among his favorite toys, and his Aunt Mary Earl, Wendy's sister, taped him on a Sony reel-to-reel deck as he sang Hey Jude, and the theme from the Monkees TV show at the same age. I was so in love with the Beatles, he told Everett True. I would dress up like John Lennon and pretend to play guitar and hold mini Beatles concerts for my family when they came over. At age 4, following a trip to the park, Mary watched as her young nephew went to the piano and banged out a rudimentary song about the trip. Kurt was also an avid visual artist. The book, Cobain Unseen, has a photo of him in front of an easel apparently about to copy a comic book cover, and when he was older, he shot short films on a Super 8 camera, some of them featuring clay figures he'd sculpted himself. But eventually, music began to occupy more of his time. He'd been given a Mickey Mouse drum set at a Christmas just before his 8th birthday, and played drums in the school band. Then, in 1981, he asked for and received a cheap second-hand guitar for his 14th birthday. By then, he'd moved on from the pop of the Beatles and the Monkees to the 70s hard rock acts, like Zeppelin, Aerosmith, and Kiss, although his rock tastes were still balanced by pop. He also became a fan of New Wave after seeing the B-52s on Saturday Night Live, and Devo would become another favorite. When he finally acquired a guitar, Kurt briefly took lessons from Warren Mason, who worked at Rosevar's Music Center in Aberdeen. Mason also upgraded his instrument, getting him an Ibanez. His main goal was to learn Stairway to Heaven, Mason later recalled. Among the other songs Kurt learned to play were AC/DC's Back in Black, Queen's Another One Bites the Dust, and The Cars' My Best Friend's Girl, which Nirvana would play at their last show on March 1st, 1994 in Munich, Germany. The lessons quickly fueled his own burgeoning musical creativity. Realizing that with power chords you can play just about anything, he soon began writing his own songs. I didn't think it was important to learn other songs, he said, because I just knew I wanted to start a band. Music also provided an escape from a troubled home life. Kurt's parents had divorced when he was 9 years old. For a time, he lived with his mother and sister in Aberdeen, then moved in with his father, who'd moved to the town of Montesano, 11 miles east. But as each parent took up with a new partner and Kurt reached his teens, he became withdrawn and argumentative, eventually leaving each household and being passed around among other relatives in the area. By the end of his high school years, he'd moved on to staying with friends or wherever else he could. His musical tastes were also beginning to veer towards punk rock. Kurt had become intrigued by punk after reading about the Sex Pistols' Shambolic 78 American tour. Later telling writer John Savage he'd, quote, fantasize about how amazing it would be to hear their music and be a part of it. As it happened, New York punkers the Ramones had actually played in Aberdeen on May 3, 1977, at the Rockers Tavern, a bar that hosted local acts and the touring bands that occasionally dropped in between dates in Seattle and Portland. Owning a live music and liquor venue in a town like Aberdeen is always an adventure, the club's owner Stan Foreman later noted. It appealed to a crowd that worked hard in the mills and timber industry and played hard on the weekends. The Ramones were an unusual choice for a venue more likely to feature mainstream touring acts like Foghat or the Guess Who. I heard the Ramones were coming, and I think there was me and one other guy in high school who even knew who they were, says Kurt Vanderhoof, then an aspiring guitarist. I couldn't believe the Ramones were playing. I went down there and I couldn't get in. I was 16. I couldn't get into the bar. But I wanted to hear it, so I just hung outside. A couple of people I knew, older brothers of some of my friends, they did get in. And they were all like, those guys suck. They were stupid. It was a prevalent attitude in the region, and aside from that one occasion, no other punk groups made it to Aberdeen. So, Kurt Cobain was left to play what he imagined punk might sound like. Telling biographer Michael Azerrad his early songwriting efforts were, quote, 3 chords and a lot of screaming. Like Led Zeppelin, but it was raunchy and I was trying to make it as aggressive and mean as I could. It was a deprivation that actually worked to Kurt's advantage, forcing him to develop his own creativity instead of simply absorbing outside influences. By the end of 1982, Kurt had made enough progress with his songwriting that he wanted to take the next step and make a recording. During Christmas break that year, he made his first known home demos at his Aunt Mary's Seattle house. Mary had begun playing guitar at age 11, and made her first public appearances at local venues where her brother Chuck's band, the Beachcombers, were playing. She later formed a 4-piece band that would play in Elks and Moose lodges as well as hotel lounges in the region. She married and moved to the Seattle area in 1979, and for a time continued performing as a solo artist. A shared interest in music naturally drew Kurt and Mary together, and when Kurt got his first guitar, he phoned his aunt to ask if guitar strings were put on alphabetically. When he arrived to make his demo, he was just as solicitous about learning to use her equipment. He was always very, very careful, she says, and whenever he ran into any problems with the equipment, he would always ask me, Aunt Mary, could you help me with this? Kurt used Mary's 4-track TIAC reel-to-reel deck. He also played a guitar and a funky little Sears bass that his aunt owned, and which later sold at an auction for $43,750. But when Mary offered him the use of her Roland Compu rhythm drum machine, Kurt firmly turned her down. Oh, no way, he said. I want to keep my music pure. Instead, he used his pink Samsonite overnight suitcase as a makeshift drum, borrowing wooden spoons from Mary's kitchen for drumsticks. In search of more unusual sounds for the recording, he also made use of a duck call that Mary had. He just had to put some weird things in there, she recalled. Although Kurt recorded his music in the room alone, Mary and her husband could hear the ringing throughout the house. Most of what I remember about the songs was a lot of distortion on guitar, really heavy bass, and the chunky sound of the wooden spoons, she says. And his voice sounding like he was mumbling under a big fluffy comforter with some passionate screams once in a while. Kurt named the tape Organized Confusion, a phrase he also wrote on a t-shirt, but while he presumably made copies of the recording for his friends, none have surfaced to date. A month after the session, Kurt sent his aunt a letter apologizing for making so much noise at her home. I can't handle the thought of invading your brain cells with my chainsaw music, he wrote. I can't see how you could stand it the last time I was up there. In the summer of 1983, Kurt made the surprising discovery that there was a real-life punk rock band in Montesano. The band was the Melvins, who had only been active for a few months, founded by Roger Buzz Osborne. Buzz, who'd moved to Montesano at age 12 from this even smaller town of Morton, Washington, was initially a fan of hard rock acts like Kiss, Aerosmith, and AC/DC, but had become interested in punk after some friends raved to him about a Clash show they'd seen in Seattle. Photos of acts like David Bowie and the Sex Pistols in Cream magazine further pivoted his interest. Unlike the many music fans who saw a clear divide between punk and hard rock and metal, Buzz was quick to pick up on the similarities between the genres. The Sex Pistols album, Nevermind the Bollocks, just sounded like a logical extension of what I'd already been listening to, he explained. Whether it was Ted Nugent or whatever, the vocals were different, but I didn't think the music sounded a whole lot different. And then I gradually got into more and more punk rock type stuff solely on my own. Buzz had started playing guitar toward the end of his high school years, teaching himself by listening to a few punk records he owned. He wouldn't own an electric guitar until after he graduated. He introduced a fellow student, Mike Dillard, to punk by playing him Nevermind the Bullocks. I was going, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing I ever heard, Mike recalled. Mike then brought in his cousin, who owned a bass, and another classmate, Matt Lukin, as a second guitarist. But as Mike's cousin rarely showed up for jam sessions, Matt soon moved over to bass. The budding group began by playing covers of classic rock acts like The Who, Jimi Hendrix, and Cream, but quickly realized that if they wanted to have any kind of credibility, they'd have to write songs of their own. There was no future unless you were writing your own music, Buzz said. They also needed a name, and decided on the Melvins, the first name of the manager of the Montesano Thriftway where Buzz and Mike both worked. It was both an inside joke, neither Buzz or Mike liked their boss, and deliberately enigmatic, offering no clue as to what the band's music might sound like. We wanted a name that was like the Ramones, Buzz explained. Kurt had been given a flyer by Buzz when he was at a Thriftway one Friday that read, The Them Festival, tomorrow night in the parking lot behind Thriftway, free live rock music. Curious, he returned on Saturday to find the band set up in a park and ride, behind the store. We found this outdoor plug from a building next to the parking lot, said Mike. We just dragged a big extension cord over there and plugged all the amps and stuff in and set up about 7 o'clock. At the time, the Melvins played at a breakneck pace typical of punk and hardcore. Their songs were rarely longer than 2 minutes, with each musician playing his instrument in an all-out attack, topped by Buzz's abrasive vocals. Although the group's first official release came out in '84, the 2005 CD, Mangled Demos from '83, has recordings made during this period. Kurt was enthralled by the band. They played music faster than I ever imagined music could be played, and with more energy than my Iron Maiden records could provide, he wrote. This was what I was looking for. He later told journalist Gina Arnold, when I saw them play, it just blew me away. I was instantly a punk rocker. He immediately became one of the band's followers, a small group of like-minded friends who hung out at Melvin's rehearsals in Montesano, and were mockingly called Klingons by Buzz. The Klingon nickname was first mentioned in Come As You Are, but future Melvins drummer Dale Crover later insisted, in journalist Mark Yarm's book Everybody Loves Our Town, whoever says we called the people who hung out with us the Klingons is completely full of it, because I never heard anybody described as Klingons. Kurt was already familiar with some of the band's members. He'd been on the same baseball team with Matt, and had Buzz in his art class. He was always a good artist, drawing-wise, Buzz said of Kurt. He would draw really amazing caricatures of the teacher having horrible things done to them. Kurt's entrance into the Melvin circle proved to be an invaluable step in the development of his own career. He'd finally discovered a group of friends who were as serious about music as he was. The band set a further example in their determination to do something musically different, stepping outside of the cover band status of most local acts. And 4 out of Nirvana's eventual 6 drummers would have direct ties to the Melvins. Nirvana changed the shape of music all over the world, Buzz later told Jeff Burlingame. And if it wasn't for the Melvins, they never would have even existed. Remember, no Melvins, no Nirvana. Buzz's collection of punk records was also useful in introducing Kurt to music otherwise unobtainable in Aberdeen. Buzz had expanded his own knowledge of punk acts when he'd met Kurt Vanderhoof in the fall of '83, when both briefly attended Grays Harbor Community College. Kurt Vanderhoof had returned to Aberdeen after a stint in The Lude, a Seattle-based punk band who'd relocated to San Francisco. Kurt Vanderhoof was happy to share his punk record collection with Buzz, and even sang with the band at an early Melvins show. I was apparently the only guy that knew all those songs they were doing, he says. They were doing Ramones and Sex Pistols and all that kind of stuff. Buzz described Vanderhoof's record collection as a really good education. I never would have found those records. None of that stuff was ever down there. Buzz also tracked down punk records via mail order, patiently waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for them to arrive. Another source was Tim Hayes, a friend who worked at a DJ Sound City at Aberdeen's Wishka Mall, who later became the owner of Seattle indie record store Fallout Records. Tim Hayes' boss would let him take promos of non-mainstream acts the store wasn't interested in selling, the Stranglers, the Cramps, the Dead Boys, etc. Buzz Osborne, in turn, made compilation tapes of those records which he then passed out to his friends, introducing the small but passionate Grays Harbor punk community to numerous other groups they would otherwise not have heard. Kurt Cobain, for one, found himself drawn to, quote, the psychotic, weird, dirgy bands like Butthole Surfers. Also among the band's fans was a 6'17" named Krist Novoselic. Krist Anthony Novoselic was born on May 16, 1965, to Krist and Maria Novoselic. Both of his parents were originally from Croatia and immigrated to San Pedro, California, where they met and married in 1964. Krist was born in the nearby town of Compton and raised in Gardena, where the family grew to include another son, Robert, and a daughter, Diana. Krist had been obsessed with music since his childhood, listening to AM radio while watching his father work on the family Volkswagen. My dad used to listen to Chuck Berry and the Rolling Stones and stuff, he says. He listened to Dick Dale. My dad was always cranking 4-track tapes. He had this garage, it was kind of his clubhouse. And he would paint, work on cars, just kind of dink around, like what I like to do, and listen to music. So I listened to a lot of music. The Beatles were another big favorite. He was just as keen to find music shows on television, watching programs such as American Bandstand, Soul Train, and Midnight Special. By the 70s, he too had moved on to hard rock metal acts like Aerosmith, Zeppelin, and Kiss. When I was really young, like 10 years old, I had all their posters and stuff, he later admitted about Kiss. In 1979, the Novoselics moved to Aberdeen, where Krist felt decidedly out of place. I was now in a different social scene where the kids dressed different, Krist later explained. There weren't a lot of kids in school that I could relate to with music. Maybe I just had a little more sophisticated understanding of music. But I wasn't very happy and my parents noticed that. And they go, oh, let's send Krist to Croatia and see if that will work for him. Krist spent a year in his parents' homeland, encountering a very different educational system than what he'd been used to at home. School was very demanding, he recalled. You'd have to study a lot. It seemed like the standards were a lot higher in their public education. Along with studying more orthodox subjects like history and math, there were classes like civil defense that touched on the harsh realities outside the schoolroom walls. There were a couple of times when this teacher brought in this huge gun to class and showed us how to disassemble it and put it back together. With his shortwave radio, Krist was able to gain exposure to the punk and new wave music beamed to the continent by the BBC. When he returned to Aberdeen in 1980, he began making music himself. As a child, he'd taken accordion lessons, and now his mother bought him a guitar. It just seemed like I listened to so much rock and roll. I just thought I'd take it up. So, I started playing guitar. Krist still felt out of place with his classmates, but kept busy in other ways, taking vocational classes in addition to his high school coursework, as well as after-school jobs. He'd also been conscientiously taping each week's broadcast of Your Mother Won't Like It, the punk new wave show that aired on Seattle station KZOK. He finally found people who shared his musical interests, when a co-worker at Aberdeen's Taco Bell introduced him to Buzz and Matt, bringing Krist into the Melvins circle. Buzz was also impressed with Krist's taste in music. I played Krist some music, and he was one of the few people who actually got it, he said. Krist had also found others in Aberdeen more resistant to new music. One friend he tried to interest in punk brushed him off. With few places available to play locally, the Melvins started landing gigs out of town, first in Olympia, the state capital, an hour's drive east of Aberdeen. But when Mike began spending more time with his girlfriend than the band, Buzz decided he needed to be replaced, although he avoided firing him by asking Matt to tell Mike the band was breaking up. He then asked Krist if he knew any drummers, and Krist introduced him to Dale Crover, who had also jammed with Krist's brother Robert. Buzz had previously seen Dale playing in local cover bands. That's really all there was, Dale explained. If you wanted to be in a band, you played with people that wanted to do high school dances. To do those shows, it was covers of the day. Dale was excited to be asked to join the Melvins, because he knew the band played the occasional show out of town. For his part, Buzz was excited about Dale's powerful drumming. He was more into heavy metal, he said, and then we introduced him to the punk rock thing, and 1,000 things really changed for us. We got a top-notch, #1 great amazing drummer, and that just pushed us through to what we ended up doing, which was music that's far more complicated, way more musical. A guitar player friend of Dale's, Larry Kalenbeck, would also have a huge impact on the Melvin sound, teaching Buzz the drop D tuning used with the lower E string tuned down a whole step to give the music a darker, heavier sound. Once Dale joined the band, Melvin's rehearsals moved to his parents' house in Aberdeen. Dale's older siblings had moved out, so there was plenty of room. His parents were finished with raising kids and he got away with murder, said Buzz. He was able to do whatever he wanted. The neighbors there, as long as we got done by 7 p.m., they didn't care. We practiced all the time. Kurt and Krist were regular attendees at the band's rehearsals. They were open-minded weirdos, said Buzz, as far as you can be in that environment. When there's not a lot of people that are thinking along the lines that you are, then you tend to gravitate towards the ones that are. We had a really dark sense of humor about everything. We would do all kinds of stupid things. One of our favorite things to do was to take out want ads from newspapers that were 6 or 7 months old, and then call the people, "Are you guys still selling that car?" We thought stupid stuff like that was hilarious. Krist was another happy recipient of Buzz's compilation tapes. He was particularly impressed with the first album by San Francisco band Flipper, album aka Generic Flipper, although he admitted it took a few spins before he fully appreciated the band's raw sound. The third time I heard it, it just blew me away, he said. But at the same time, Generic Flipper is nowhere on the radar screen. Society doesn't recognize how important this is. Well, I recognized it, and Kurt sure did. He loved that record. In late 2006, Krist Novoselic would join Flipper for a 2-year stint. Now, one of the few opportunities for local bands in Aberdeen to play a more professional venue than a house party came on May 4th, 1984, when the Melvins opened at a concert at Aberdeen's DNR Theatre. That show went really well, surprisingly, Kurt Vanderhoof recalls. Krist Novoselic joined the Melvins during their set for a cover of Cream's Sunshine of Your Love. It was probably his first public appearance. Seeing other shows required travel, usually up to Seattle. Matt had this big Impala, Krist recalls. It sat 6 comfortably. Big bench in the front, bench in the back. We just cruised up there. Now, they didn't just see punk shows. Buzz Osborne recalls seeing Van Halen, as well as punk bands. I didn't see a lot of difference. I thought they were both equally good, he said. But I appreciated the punk rock stuff more, because it was more intimate. And ultimately, that's what drove me away from arena rock eventually. Punk rock spoke to me more, and the intimacy and the message and things of that nature. And then I realized this was really a big eye-opener, that the world is bigger than the world that I'd been in, and that there's a lot more cool things going on that the people that I was around had no idea about. At the time, no clubs in Seattle regularly hosted punk shows, so concerts were held in a variety of unlikely venues, including the hall of one building originally built to cater to Seattle's Norwegian community. Music offered the one bright spot in Kurt's life. Beyond that, his future prospects seemed increasingly dim. He dropped out of high school in the spring of '85, and soon found himself working as a janitor, at the very school he dropped out of. Most of his janitorial jobs were short-term, as were his living arrangements. He was evicted from one apartment and asked to leave 2 other friends' homes when he overstayed his welcome. The only area in which he showed any sense of discipline was music. He jammed with the Melvins when he could, although there are conflicting stories as to whether or not he was ever seriously considered as a potential 4th member. But he was a regular at all their shows, sometimes even helping to carry their gear in order to get in for free, and drawing a Kiss mural on the side of the band's van. He also played with anyone who was willing, although he had so far been unable to get a band together that moved beyond the practice room. We had several joke bands, as we called them then, but our main focus was on the Melvins, who were starting to get an Olympia, Seattle-based following, says Greg Hokinson, another friend who hung out at Melvin's practices. The short-lived band that Kurt put together with Hokinson and Dale Crover certainly had a joke name, Fecal Matter, and only managed to play one show. The group made a few primitive recordings on a boombox with some overdubbing, recording a backtrack, and then playing it on a stereo while Kurt sang into the boombox. Hokinson recalls the band working through a number of covers, the Ramones song Carbona Not Glue, the blues number Nobody's Fault But Mine, which Zeppelin had recorded on Presence, songs by Jimi Hendrix and the Monkees, and an Elvis song, quote-unquote. Kurt also worked on original material. Although Kurt didn't make the cut as a Melvin, Buzz was nonetheless impressed with his efforts to do something different. I remember him showing me things and I thought, wow, he said. There's a certain magic to putting 2 simple chords together in a way that sounds nice to someone. Kurt had the ability to do that. Now, was he the greatest singer? No. Was he the greatest guitar player? No. But he had something that people who are better singers and better guitar players don't have. The ability to put something together in an interesting way. That kind of technical ability of being able to master full guitar playing and be an amazing singer has nothing to do with writing music, Nothing. In the spring of 1986, Kurt decided to more formally document Fecal Matter's work, and Matt drove him and Dale back to Aunt Mary's house to record another demo. Since I wasn't as good a drummer as Dale, I didn't do any recordings with them, Hokinson explains. This recording session was previously thought to have happened in December of '85, but Mary remembers it taking place around Easter. They set up in my music room and they just crank it up, she recalls. It was loud. They would put down the music first, and then he'd put the headphones on and all you could hear was Kurt's voice screaming through the house. It was pretty wild. My husband and I, we just look at each other and smile and go, you think we should close the window so the neighbors don't hear? So they don't think we're beating him up or something? Mary also noticed how Kurt had improved as a musician since his last visit. He was much more confident in his vocals, she observed, and he was more progressed in knowing what he wanted the thing to sound like. Kurt and Dale recorded a total of 13 of Kurt's songs, with Kurt on guitar and vocals, Dale on bass and drums. They survive as the earliest known examples of Kurt's songwriting. The music clearly reveals his influences: fast, thrashing punk, and the slower chug of hard rock. Vocally, he's still searching for a style. Having not yet found that familiar rasping drawl, he growls and shouts. He sings in a clipped British accent, he speaks in a mumbling drone. As Kurt later recalled, it was totally abrasive fast punk music. There were some Nirvana elements, some slower songs even then, and some heavy influence stuff. Lyrically, the songs took broad, sarcastic swipes at mainstream society. Aunt Mary recalls, "As far as really sharing his music with me and asking what I thought, he really didn't do that," she says. Kurt was very sensitive about the stuff that he wrote, and he was very careful about who he let hear it. He didn't really like someone just poking fun at it, and being a songwriter myself, I can understand that. One song in particular stands out, Spank Through. Of all the Fecal Matter songs, it veers the closest towards pop, with an atypically jangling guitar opening. Kurt's voice drones during the verses, going up an octave in the chorus, which he sings with a mock sincerity. The song is the only one from the Fecal Matter session to be officially released thus far, on the 2005 compilation Sliver, The Best of the Box. Although a number of the other songs have surfaced on collector's circuits in the either partial or complete form. Spank Through and Downer would later be re-recorded, and Aneurysm would also be performed live for a brief period, while lyrics from other numbers would resurface in the Nirvana songs If You Must and even in his youth. Kurt named the Fecal Matter tape Illiteracy Will Prevail, and immediately dubbed off copies for his friends with a handmade illustration on the J card of a pile of excrement. He spelled his name correctly on the inside of the J card, but on the outside credited himself as Kurt, Kurdt equals guitar mouth. It was the first time he was known to have spelled his name in this fashion, and he was credited as Kurt with a D on all future releases until the Smells Like Teen Spirit single, as well as in interviews and press releases. "I have no real reason," he later told Michael Azerrad about the various name spellings he used over the years. "I just didn't bother spelling it correctly. I didn't care." Of course, there was already another Aberdonian who spelled his name the same way, Kurt Vanderhoof. In any case, Dale Crover was later dismissive of the recording, telling writer Greg Prado in Grunge is Dead, "People talk about that demo like it's this unreleased thing that must be amazing. But not really. A crappy 4-track demo." At the time, Buzz Osborne thought otherwise, as he wrote in a letter to Krist and his girlfriend Shelley Dilley, who had moved to Arizona in early '86. The letter says the following, quote, "Cobain and Dale went up to his aunt's house and made a tape of some of Kurt's songs. I was pretty impressed. Some of his songs are real killer, despite the poor sound quality. It seems good, but could have been better with a little more time. Nevertheless, it's still a great demo. I think he could have some kind of future in music if he keeps at it." The letter was dated April 16, 1986, more proof that the session happened in '86, not '85. Had the session had happened in '85, Kurt would have undoubtedly given Krist a tape then. And the letter makes it clear that Buzz is talking about a recent event, not something from 4 months ago when Krist was still living in Aberdeen. Kurt's aunt says the session happened around Easter, which in '86 was on March 30th, 2.5 weeks before Buzz wrote his letter. Kurt continued practicing the Fecal Matter songs with Buzz and Mike Dillard, but the project quickly fell apart. Instead, Kurt ended up making his public debut in a one-off trio called Brown Towel, a name misspelled Brown Cow on some posters, on May 3rd, '86, at GESCO, the Greater Evergreen Student Community Cooperative Organization, a venue affiliated with the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Kurt recited his lyrics and poetry as Buzz and Dale backed him. Although he later confessed that his nervousness made him get, quote, totally wasted on wine before the performance, he acquitted himself well, just jumping around the stage, reading, singing, and screaming, as Dale later put it. A fair description of Kurt's performing style in Nirvana as well. "I had a splendid time," Kurt later told the fanzine Matt Lukin's Legs about the gig. The show also helped distinguish Kurt from the other Melvins followers. Although Kurt's attempts to take his music further were still halted by his inability to find any compatible musical collaborators, he was now nonetheless focused on pursuing a musical career, having gone so far as to ask his Aunt Mary for advice on how to put together a demo tape, and dealing with song publishers. She sent him a copy of Making It With Music, Kenny Rogers' Guide to the Music Business. That says to me, and should say to others, that he was definitely looking to get into the music business, and that was the direction he was heading, Aunt Mary later recalled. So many people think that Kurt was like, oh no, I don't care if I'm ever famous. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that for a moment. I think in every musician, there's a part of us that wants to be up on that big stage and wants to be on MTV. And he definitely had stuff inside of him that he felt was worthy of getting out there and making it. He thought he could do it. And so I sent him that book. Kurt would finally find the musical partner he'd been looking for in Krist Novoselic. Krist Novoselic returned to Aberdeen in the latter half of 1986, having spent only a few months in Phoenix. Kurt and Krist had previously jammed together as teenagers and were both in a Melvins side project called the Stiff Woodies, a name inspired by the name of a Seattle punk band, Limp Richards. That band was just like a revolving door. Just messing around, says Krist. Just having fun and drinking alcohol and jumping around and screaming, making noise. Kurt played both guitar and drums in the group, and Krist occasionally took a turn as a singer. A surviving recording of a session at Chaos, Evergreen's radio station, has him handling the lead vocals on the up-tempo breakdance boogie, enthusiastically urging the listener to, quote, party down, party up. At the time, Krist's musical ambitions were less serious than Kurt's. I was having fun, having kicks, he says. I always wanted to be in a band, but there was nobody I could be in a band with. Now that he'd returned to Aberdeen, Kurt gave Krist a copy of the Fecal Matter tape. I was dinking around the house listening to it, and I said, hey, this is really good, he recalls. I really liked it. I thought it was cool. It was good melodies and interesting. He was especially impressed with Spank Through. It's a well put together song, Krist said. It's got a hook. It's kind of unique. It sounds different. And I went, yeah, let's do it. We kind of found each other, Krist says of his musical alliance with Kurt. Just out of necessity, just to play music together. Of all the people that were hanging out with the Melvins, there was just something. We were drawn to each other, it made sense. The hard times were far from over, but the band that would become Nirvana was on its way. In September of 1986, Kurt Cobain moved into a small house at 1000 East 2nd Street in Aberdeen, universally referred to as the Shack due to its dilapidated condition. It quickly became as much of a hangout for their friends as Dale Crover's home had been, with the added benefit of having no parental figures around. Krist was already Kurt's most frequent jamming partner, but it took them a while to find another member for their nascent group. They rehearsed with one friend, Bob McFadden, upstairs at Maria's Hair Design, the beauty parlor owned by Krist's mother. Other musicians came and went, as the two constantly rejigged the lineup, including who played which instrument. Sometimes, Kurt and Krist switched from their usual guitar and bass roles to drums and guitar respectively. Kurt was really good on drums, Krist recalls. They also toyed with the idea of putting together a Creedence Clearwater Revival covers band. But, like many of their ideas, it came to nothing. That was a ploy to make money, Krist explains. Play in a tavern like a bar band, but we thought we'd play cool songs. It was just something to do to screw around on the side. We played once or twice and got bored with it. Eventually, they finally approached Aaron Burckhard, a drummer they'd met at Melvins practices. According to Matt Lukin, he and Buzz Osborne had briefly considered Aaron as Mike Dillard's replacement in the Melvins, but decided against it in part because of Aaron's mustache, the bane of punk rockers. Having a big bushy Tom Selleck mustache just meant you were trying to be something you weren't, Matt explained. Aaron, older than both Kurt and Krist, had grown up in West Seattle and moved to Aberdeen in his mid-teens, where he played in a local band called Soon. Aaron lived behind Dale Crover's house across an alley dubbed Swagger Alley. I used to go over and watch the Melvins practice a lot, he says. Every time they practiced, I was over there. It was just something to do. I was amazed at how loud they were. Aaron was also hanging out at Kurt's shack. We used to party in there, he says. We used to drink Schmidt beer and smoke pot all day and play music. Kurt didn't have a refrigerator or a stove. All he had was a little toaster oven, and in his room he had a framed picture of Bob Sherman on his wall. I never really understood that, so that was pretty weird. Despite being a staunch metalhead, in Aaron's words, I was into Motley Crue and AC/DC and Kurt was more into the punk scene, Aaron agreed to join the fledgling band. I'd heard that Kurt was a guitar player and that Krist was a bass player, he says. I never heard him play before. The day I joined the band, I didn't have no drums, so we went out to a friend's house and he set me up with some drums, and we went over to Kurt's house and practiced that same night. It was an early indication of Kurt's single-minded focus on rehearsal. Kurt was just a stickler for practicing, Aaron says. We practiced a lot, every day for hours. Once Kurt got off work, it was practice non-stop. It was pretty crazy. Sometimes we'd play the same song over and over until Kurt got it right, you know. We would play the set and then I would just start playing the songs again right away without ever looking up to see if those guys wanted to play them again. Kurt later told biographer Michael Azerrad, I just whipped them into shape. Although the band would warm up with Led Zeppelin covers, From the outset, they concentrated on original material. The songs were all Kurt's, although he tried to downplay his dominant role, telling one journalist, "I don't like to be considered the songwriter, but I do come up with the basics." It was a great songwriting pattern that would continue throughout Nirvana's career, with the germ of a song idea generally coming from Kurt. He was the lead songwriter, Krist confirms. He had the idea, like he had riffs and a vocal line that he'd be hammering out. He'd be holed up somewhere by himself, hammer things out, and then he would just start busting them out at rehearsal. Sometimes it was just a riff and a vocal melody. Sometimes it was a couple of riffs, more like a song. Then it depended on what everybody else's input was. The drummer is really important. The drums kind of set a tone, a beat, that tells you what kind of personality the song is going to have. And I put my spin on it too. I get a hit off the song and try to do something interesting. Instead of just following the guitar, I'd just go for things, or come up with another part, like a bridge or something. He'd just have the one riff and melody and I'd just bust something out. And then we'd all jump on board to that. And then the next thing you know, there'd be another part of the song. A lot of it was unsaid too. The band just cranked it out. But it definitely had a leader. Kurt knew what he wanted to do. 3 songs from the Fecal Matter demo tape were rehearsed: Spank Through, Downer, and Aneurysm. Krist dismisses the later number as grotesque punk rock. It was the melodic pull of songs like Spank Through that were of greater interest for him. And for all of Kurt's later disparagement of Downer, Krist felt it showed the band's versatility. "It's kind of an alt-punk song," he says. "It shows the band right from the start wasn't a hardcore band or wasn't a rock band. The genre was kind of alt-punk. We tried to be original, to have a song that's unique and has its own personality." I know Kurt was listening to a lot of Scratch Acid and Butthole Surfers, just songs with personality. Kurt was also busy writing new material, drawing on the hours he spent sitting around in my underwear just picking out riffs, pieces of songs, in his own words. "Kurt did so much work while the rest of us were off having our lives," says Ryan Agner, who knew Kurt and Krist from school, and, living a block away from Kurt's shack, was a frequent visitor to rehearsals. He sat in that house writing and listening to music and plotting and planning everything that pertained to the music and to the band. And just being very, very creative all the time. Not feeding himself, not shopping, not showering, not preening, not doing all the dozens of things normal people do. Kurt didn't bother with that. He had stacks and stacks of notebooks that were full of ramblings that he would pluck lyrics out of for his songs. So when they would come to rehearsal, he was ready. He was locked and loaded. He spent a tremendous amount of time working at all hours. That's the way Kurt was. New songs like Mexican Seafood and Hairspray Queen were very much influenced by the edgy punk of acts like Butthole Surfers and Scratch Acid. Hairspray Queen in particular also has a scratchy guitar line right out of the Gang of Four Au Pair school. Krist describes such songs as, quote, real alt-rock, really original, trying to be brainy or trying to be interesting. You know what I mean? And Mexican Seafood, it's actually kind of funk. That song takes a few hard turns. It's a very rhythmic song. It's alt-rock, not just straight-ahead big riff rock. Both songs are lyrically busy. Mexican Seafood draws on Kurt's interest, some would say obsession, with bodily functions, while Hairspray Queen is more free associative, particularly in the wordplay of mind and mine. Kurt professed to spend little time on his lyrics. "I don't consider lyrics a big deal at all," he said in 1989. "As long as it has a good melody line, a hook and live energy is far more important." I remember Kurt explaining to me one day how he wrote vocal lines, says Ryan. He said, "I don't even do words. I sort of write the vocal melody with consonants and vowels and just go blah 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 blah." After he got it all phrased out, he would go through his notebooks and begin plugging words to see how they fit. And as the song began to take shape, he started playing around with the words again to see how you could twist them into meaning something. To him, making the words mean something was the last thing. And then the words would change. You would go to a show at the Community World Theater in Tacoma and then a show at the Squid Row in Seattle, and the same song would be different. Because quite honestly, he didn't remember the words. But there certainly was big riff rock as well, as evidenced by new songs like Pencap Chew and Aero Zeppelin. That was a joke, Krist says of the latter song. That was a riff-o-rama, a bunch of riffs put together. Both Aero Zeppelin and If You Must also offer something of a critique of the music business. If You Must is in part concerned with the pressure of having to write a song, while Aero Zeppelin ridicules the mindless fans who blindly follow any act if it's been properly branded. It was the kind of commentary that might be expected from the later day Kurt, who routinely disparaged rock stardom, but was surprising for a band whose performances had so far been limited to practices in a tiny room. That was about to change, however. The unnamed band's first attempt to play somewhere else besides Kurt's house, a party in Olympia, was over before it even began when the expectant trio arrived at their destination to find a next-door neighbor already complaining about the noise. I loaded up Krist's bass stuff in my car and Krist rode with Kurt, Aaron recalls. We all met up at this house party and there was just a mass of people. But as we were going in, some lady next door was screaming, I called the cops, you'll be shut down. So we all get in the house and they had all the band stuff in there but we couldn't play. The musicians returned home in defeat. Soon after that, in March, Ryan helped set up a date at another house party. I inserted myself into this thing, he says. I was very industrious. Ryan was friends with a guitarist named Tony Pakula, a former roommate of his who'd also been in a local band called Black Ice. Tony was now living in Raymond, a small town 20 miles south of Aberdeen, with his friend Jeff Franks, who was a drummer. There was a good music community back then, says Tony. Hoping to find a place to play for his friends other than the shack, Ryan approached Tony about having them play at his home. Sure, bring him down, Tony said. Always having a party here. There's always some beer. Have him come over. So the next week, I'm up in Aberdeen and I'm saying we should do this, says Ryan. It probably took a week or two to convince them. It was one of those deals where I said, look, I'll get the van, I'll haul the gear, I've got the money, I'll put the gas in the tank. All you've got to do is just show up. They didn't know these people, so they were self-conscious about it. I said, well, it's Tony. You remember Tony. He's a nice guy, it'll be fine. We'll have fun, get a case of beer, turn it into a party. So basically, that's how it all happened. I just pushed it by financing the whole thing. A Saturday night date was finally agreed on. Author Jeff Burlingame cites March 7th in his Kurt biography, and Ryan, who worked as a carpet layer for Benny's Quality Floors, borrowed the company van to drive the group including Kurt's girlfriend Tracy Mirander and Krist's girlfriend Shelley, over to Raymond. It was our first show, obviously we were all excited about playing, says drummer Aaron Burckhard, who was also pleased he'd be able to use the host drum kit. Tony had a mint drum set, so I was like, cool, we don't have to load my crappy set. Nonetheless, he admits to feeling somewhat intimidated by the partygoers. We called them socias. High class, just better than us kind of people, he says, referring to the terminology in S.E. Clinton's classic novel, The Outsiders. The rest of the group also felt a bit out of place, as the party attendees were far from the punk rockers they were used to hanging out with in Aberdeen, even though they'd been classmates of Tony's. Their coming down to Raymond was just a bunch of old friends of mine coming over to my house to play some music, Tony says. Part of it was our own fault because we dressed like bums, Ryan recalls. Tracy was from Olympia, and she would wear kind of bizarre clothing. Kurt would wear kind of ratty clothing. Krist, who was able to socialize very well, would wear kind of weird, quirky clothes. Shelley's dressed in all black. And I'm wearing the black leather jacket, denim jeans with gigantic gaping thrashed holes. My pants looked like that because I was a carpet layer, and then it was cold, so you'd wear long johns. They were probably dirty, and we wouldn't wash our hair, so it would stick up and be greasy. We would go to a show in Tacoma or Olympia or Seattle, that's how all the kids looked. But when we would show up somewhere socially in Aberdeen or Hoquiam, that's not the way the kids looked. So we walk into the room and we've got an attitude. We've got a scowl on our face. We're not really sure we want to be there. If you ever been in one of those situations where you walk into a room and you go, hey, no one told me it wasn't a costume party. That's the way it was. And we feel awkward. We're waiting for someone to walk up to us and say, hey, you guys got here. We've been waiting for you all night. But that never happened. Nonetheless, Jeff Franks made sure to record the show on a Sony Walkman, thus preserving Nirvana's first non-rehearsal show. We were always recording our sessions, says Tony. Most of the time with a 4-track. But this time I think Jeff had this little stereo Sony Walkman recorder just running out of habit. I remember standing in our kitchen and him opening his jacket, revealing the recorder with the stereo mic clipped to his collar. Because Tony and Jeff were used to jamming with people who came by their house, they'd assumed that would be the case tonight. But when Tony picked up his guitar, he says it, quote, quickly became apparent that Jeff and I were not going to be able to play. Ryan came over to me and said they're not much for jamming with others, so I set my guitar down, grabbed a beer, and enjoyed the show. The band warmed up with Downer, which had progressed markedly since its appearance on the Fecal Matter demo tape, most noticeably in the faster tempo. After a break, Kurt indulges in a lengthy bit of feedback before finally launching into Aero Zeppelin. It's the first time we hear the drawling vocal style that will become very much part of Nirvana's sound, although here, the pounding riffs emulating the band's name checked in the song's title take precedence. Even accounting for the extended intro, the song runs almost 6 minutes. It would later be tightened up to just under 5 minutes. One thing that Kurt would do is when he arranged a tune, he'd tend to drive the riff into the ground, Krist later explained. And so I would come in and say, well, we need to do that riff half as long. There's little response from the audience, who can be heard chatting amiably between songs, and the pauses in the recording make the event seem less of a continuous show than a party occasionally interrupted by a few songs. The band are hardly the focal point. Nevertheless, however, they persevere, going into If You Must, with Kurt's keening vocal matched by the instrumental drone that was also key to Nirvana's sound. And when Kurt goes up an octave during the bridge, the song surges with power. After another break, the group goes into a cover, prompted by Krist's constant noodling on the opening riff of Zeppelin's Heartbreaker. Kurt eventually joins in, providing the crowd with a taste of something more conventional, even though Krist's over-the-top vocal suggests that, for the band at least, there was also an element of parody. Kurt gamely obliges requests for a solo, then segues into Zeppelin's How Many More Times, with Krist and Aaron soon joining in. Now gaining some momentum, the band positively races through Mexican seafood. Then comes the grind of Pen Cap Chew, surely heavy enough for any Zeppelin fan, followed by a somewhat ragged spank-through which Kurt introduces as Breaking the Law, and which comes to a stuttering halt, causing someone to gaffe, "They messed up." It takes a few minutes for the band to start their next number, making 2 attempts at starting Hairspray Queen before they're able to get past the opening and finally turn in a solid yet thrash-heavy version, with Aaron Burckhard's cymbals very much at the forefront. The recording of the concert cuts off after a request for Stairway to Heaven. "We were really drunk," Kurt later remembered of the show, "so we started making spectacles of ourselves." Krist had been particularly high-spirited during the set, jumping on the console TV, then leaping through the living room window and running back inside the house via the kitchen. "Instead of just playing our show, we thought, why not have an event?" "It was an event," Krist explained. "I just remember getting drunk," says Aaron Burckhard. "I don't think we had a set list. I think we wrote down like 4 songs that we knew and the rest were just songs we were still practicing. But we played them anyway, you know?" And Krist found some of that fake vampire blood stuff and put it all over himself and kept jumping through the living room window and running back through the kitchen. So it was pretty crazy. Ryan Agar recalls Kurt simply walking off when he got tired of playing. Ryan then joined the other musicians jamming on Flipper's Sex Bomb as the party guests retreated to the kitchen. The visitors' attempts at being outrageous eventually began to get out of control, as Ryan realized when Tony came over to speak to him. "Hey, you know, things are getting a little out of hand," Tony said. "Maybe you guys should leave." "Really?" Ryan asked. "What do you mean?" "Well," Tony replied, "Krist is out there peeing on everyone's cars." "We were in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen when this happened," says Ryan. "And I remember peering out the window above the sink, looking up, and there's Krist. They had this big light outside, so you could see the rain coming down, and Krist has his shirt off, he's standing on top of the van, and he's peeing. I go outside, and people are going, why is he doing that? What's the matter with you guys? And I'm going, I'm sorry." Ryan's attempt at damage control was further hampered when he ran into Kurt talking to a young woman at the back door. She had one of those really done-up hairdos, he says, and Kurt's reciting the words to Hairspray Queen, and he was saying these obscenities to her. And I was just like, what are you telling her? And he says, well, she asked me what the lyrics to Hairspray Queen were. And I go, Kurt, those aren't the words to that song. And he goes, well, I know, but she doesn't, so screw her. And I was like, why are you guys doing this? This is exactly what I was worried about you doing. You guys acting like a bunch of crazy kids. And yet, that was partly the point. Because they'd actually offended people, the whole event had become a success, Ryan continues. There were really 2 ways it could have gone. It could have gone really great, where everybody went, wow, you guys are the next big thing. Where have you been all our lives? Or they could have been run out of town. And since they weren't greeted with praise and were run out of town, that constituted a success. Yeah, we offended them, and that's what we wanted to do, because we're punk rock. Aaron concurred with that assessment. The show was fun, but we didn't know how we went over, really, he says. But it sounded alright to us, you know. I guess we didn't care what other people thought. It took us a while to get packed up, to get everyone corralled, and I was pretty loaded, Ryan admits. After the anxiety of getting out of there and being like, okay, we're on the road, we're going home, nobody's hurt, I think we got everybody. I sort of had the adrenaline kind of wane and I realized I'm really drunk. And about that time, we were coming out of Raymond going up the hill to go over the pass there. And I remember people saying, your driving's not so hot. I pulled over and Aaron took over driving. I don't really remember much of the way home. In all the excitement, the band members remained unaware that their first show had been recorded. And none of the members ever received a copy of the tape. 17 years later, Heartbreaker would be the opening track on Nirvana's With the Lights Out box set. After the Raymond show, Krist introduced the song to the group that would become an integral part of the setlist for the next 6 years, Love Buzz. The song was originally recorded by the Dutch band Shocking Blue, who enjoyed an English-language US-UK hit with Venus in the early 70s. Krist found the song off a self-titled American compilation of the band's work that had been given to him by a friend who picked it up at Dill's secondhand store in Aberdeen. The whole beauty of Dill's was that everything was $1, says Ryan. It didn't matter what it was. Every record was $1, and so if you found a gem, you really had something, because you were only going to pay $1 for it. Ryan, of course, being Ryan Agar, a close friend of the band's. I put the record on as I was getting ready for work, and I thought, goodness, this is great, Krist recalls. And that song came on, and I was like, this is a really cool song. When Kurt came over the next day, Krist wasted no time in playing him the record. Check this song out, he said. Isn't it cool? Kurt agreed, and suggested the band do a cover of it, although they didn't bother telling Aaron it wasn't an original number. We played that song for 6 months before I even knew it was a cover, says drummer Aaron Burckhard. I mean, it's not like we sat down and Kurt put it on and said, this is the way it goes. I just figured Kurt wrote a new song. In fact, there are few similarities between their version and Shocking Blue's original. The Eastern flavor of the Shocking Blue version comes through strongly in its use of the sitar. The song was also taken at a moderate tempo, and has a harsher feel due to the stentorian lead vocal of Mariska Veris, who sounded not unlike Grace Slick. Kurt only learned the song's first verse and chorus, changing the original lyrics King of My Dreams to Queen of My Heart. Intriguingly, he also changes Hear My Love Buzz to Feel My Love Buzz. Despite the lack of sitar, the guitar and bass nonetheless managed to create a suitable Eastern-sounding drone, with the song's instrumental break allowing Kurt to indulge himself by creating squalling feedback. The whole idea of a cover is to have some fun, he explained to Melody Maker. We've never bothered to do a straight copy, and we've never tried to pull a song apart in order to learn it properly. We'd rather just get on and do it. Krist agrees. We never tried to, quote, cover the song. We kind of did our own version of it. It took on a life of its own. Kurt found another song for the band to play, White Lace and Strange by Philadelphia trio Thunder and Roses. Once again, Aaron Burckhard was unaware that the song was a cover. The song was the opening track on the band's soul album, 1969's King of the Black Sunrise. It sounded just like Cream or something, says Krist, because it was so straight ahead. We didn't have a whole heck of a lot of songs in our repertoire, so we'd throw in a few covers, and we weren't going to do metal covers, we thought we'd do something obscure. We like to have fun too, you know. Nirvana's version of the song was a good deal more roll-licking than the earnest original, and taken at a much faster clip. They make no attempt to replicate the chorus harmonies, and the song's instrumental break is scaled back to a brief 30 seconds. It's the kind of song a band kicks into when they're taking a break from more serious work. A more important addition to the set was a new original number, Floyd the Barber. In contrast to the more complex numbers like Beeswax or Mexican Seafood, songs written only a few months previously, Floyd the Barber is positively stark in its simplicity and thus packs more of an emotional punch. The song takes on the genteel setting of Mayberry, a fictional small town in the 60s sitcom The Andy Griffith Show, and laces it with black humor, as the luckless protagonist who visits Floyd Lawson's barber shop finds himself strapped to a chair, sexually assaulted, and slashed with razors by the show's characters. Like David Lynch's depictions of small-town life in Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks, the song delights in exposing the dark undercurrents, swirling beneath a seemingly idyllic setting. It would become one of the most durable songs in Nirvana's repertoire. The band's first non-party show came on April 18, 1987, when the band played the Community World Theater in Tacoma, a blue-collar city 80 miles from Aberdeen. The theater was a former movie house, and the show was booked through Kurt's girlfriend Tracy, who knew the booker, Jim May. Needing some kind of a name for the show, the group settled on Skid Row. Kurt wrote the name in big block letters on the pink suitcase he'd used as a drum on his Organized Confusion demo, and that he was now carrying guitar parts and cables in. The Community World Theater would be their regular venue for the next year. They were crazy shows, says Aaron Burckhard. I just remember it being cold. It was always cold in the theater, and Krist was always wrapped in a blanket. But they were fun. The shows never drew a big crowd, but helped the fledgling band develop a following, with Ryan loyally driving his friends to the shows. I generally provided vehicles, particularly early on, because I was a carpet layer and we had carpet vans that were readily available. He explains. I would lie to my boss and tell him a friend of mine was moving or whatever, and I could thus borrow the van for the night. I wouldn't tell him that I was driving a band halfway across the state and there's probably a bunch of beer involved. I didn't tell him things like that. One of the other bands on the bill was Nisqually Delta Podunk Nightmare, which featured Slim Moon and Dylan Carlson, who had each been favorably impressed by Kurt's one-off performance with the Melvins the previous year. They gave Skid Row the thumbs up as well. You could definitely tell Kurt was going into Gang of Four at the time, Dylan observed. A lot more complex rhythm, a herky-jerky kind of sound. Slim recalled Kurt being, quote, very glammed out. He wore platinum boots and this crazy outfit, and all the songs seemed like a riff just played over and over and over again. But his singing was very engaging. I thought they were pretty cool. Skid Row's performance was strong enough that it led to the band's first show in Olympia, a town that would have a huge impact on the band's and especially Kurt's musical development. Olympia was home to the Evergreen State College, a non-traditional institution where students designed their own program of study and received evaluations instead of grades. Evergreen encouraged innovation and progressive thinking among its student body, and attracted people interested in taking an active role in shaping their own education, with the result that Olympia had a much richer streak of unconventionality than was usual in a college town. They would allow outsiders to come there and throw wild parties, Buzz Osborne recalled. Any town that has something like that will have alternative culture as well, you know. A town that doesn't have it, it's not going to have punk rock shows. It's not going to have people from the outside coming in, bringing their ideas and wanting to do things along those lines for like-minded people. Olympia had that solely as a result of that college. Evergreen's radio station, Chaos, became one of the foremost alternative stations in the country, after John Foster, originally hired as the station's record librarian, changed the station format in the late 70s, to one mandating that 80% of the music broadcast had to be on an independent label. Chaos Radio was one of the few stations in the country, in fact, I think it might have been the only station in the country, that had an independent music policy, said Bruce Pavitt, an Evergreen student and music fan, who was excited by the wide range of music the station aired. Bruce was originally from Park Forest, a suburb of Chicago, and after 2 years at Blackburn College in Carlinville, Illinois, he transferred to Evergreen, where, he liked to say, he majored in punk rock. Bruce was inspired not only by John's work at Chaos, but also by the magazine he co-founded, OP, which initially appeared as an insert in the Chaos program guide. Its first standalone issue was published in August of 1979. OP covered independent artists from A to Z, quite literally, with each issue writing about artists whose names started with A, then B, then C, right on through the rest of the alphabet. Accordingly, the magazine's run ended after 26 issues. In addition to being a Chaos DJ and a member of two bands, Tiny Hole and War with Elevators, Bruce also interned at OP, and, before long, decided to put out his own publication. In 1980, he published the first issue of a zine he called Subterranean Pop. By issue 3, the name was shortened to Sub Pop. The Sub Pop fanzines featured record reviews organized regionally, which was unique, says Bruce. It was the only magazine in the country solely devoted to US indies. No real band features per se. Sub Pop covered a lot of records from more obscure regional scenes, and always provided addresses. Pre-internet, it was an excellent information source for obscure indie discs. As the editorial in the third issue put it, we have to decentralize our society and encourage local art and things in music. Bruce published 9 issues of Subterranean Pop Sub Pop between 1979 and 83. Issues 5, 7, and 9 were cassette zines, essentially compilation tapes. I was writing about a lot of music that people really had a hard time getting access to, so releasing cassettes of demo tapes from some of these groups seemed to make sense, he explains. The cassettes not only featured acts from the Northwest, but around the country as well. With a canny eye towards marketing, Bruce tapped a fellow Evergreen student, Charles Burns, to illustrate the cassette J cards, aware that the black and white artwork would more readily capture attention when reproduced in a magazine. Tapes were sold for $4 a piece on generic tape or $5 for higher quality normal bias cassette. I paid my rent and electric bill for a year just off these cassettes, Bruce later explained. Bruce's work in turn inspired another Evergreen student and music fan, Calvin Johnson, who also DJ'd at Chaos and wrote for OP, in addition to contributing to Sub Pop both as a writer and artist. He appeared on Sub Pop 5 as a member of the Cool Rays, his first recorded appearance, and on Sub Pop 9 in the group Laura, Heather, and Calvin. Noting the success Bruce had with his inexpensively produced cassettes, Calvin decided to launch his own label, K Records. The K stood for knowledge, he explained, with the first release being the tape Survival of the Coolest by Olympia band Supreme Cool Beings in 1982. K's 1984 compilation tape, Let's Together, featured the first Melvins recording. The same year also saw the release of K's first vinyl record, the single Our Secret / What's Important by Calvin's latest band, Beat Happening, produced by Greg Sage of Portland band The Wipers. All of this made Olympia a fertile and welcoming environment for a developing band. Slim was booking a May 1st show at a venue called Gesco, which was to feature his own band Nisqually Delta Podunk Nightmare, and another Olympia act, Danger Mouse, with a cover charge of $2.50. Having enjoyed Skid Row's show the previous month, he asked if they would like to play as well. The set almost didn't happen though. Right before the band went on stage, an inebriated Krist was deemed too drunk to go on. But the band was finally allowed to play due to the fact that it was Gesco's closing night. Allison Wolfe, who later formed the band Bratmobile, was in the audience. It was great, she said. I remember feeling like something big was happening. Even though no one was there, the band was the perfect blend of 70s punk, but it also had this Zeppelin feel to it. The resulting performance also led to Skid Row's first radio performance. Evergreen students John Goodmanson and Donna Dresch were members of Danger Mouse, and John in particular was fascinated by Skid Row's antics. He recalls the standout being when Kurt would, quote, jump in the air and do the splits, while wearing these weird, really tall clogs, like the same platform shoes Slim Moon had noticed Kurt wearing during Skid Row's Community World Theater performance, and which Kurt had purchased at Dill's second-hand store. As John Goodmanson recalls, quote, that was quite a performance-like rock moment. He also played with a delay pedal, which was not punk rock. And I did as well, so we kind of bonded on that geek-out level. I remember after they played, Donna getting mad at me. She was like, you like them better than us, don't you? And I was like, I was super into them. I really dug their whole trip. It seemed so fresh and exciting. I was a big fan of older school punk rock stuff, like Social Distortion and stuff like that, but I liked the 70s punk stuff too, and it seemed like a really potent combination of that. John and Donna each hosted radio shows which ran back-to-back on Chaos. The Toy Train Crash Backside Bone Beefcake Show, and the other show, Out of Order. I was like 19, how embarrassing, says John of his show's name. But that's what it was called. The shows also featured live sets by local bands and other acts passing through town. And, right after the Gesco show, John made arrangements for Skid Row to appear. The show's exact date is uncertain. John says the shows were broadcast on Monday nights, but a cassette tape labeled Out of Order, pictured in the Cobain book Cobain on Scene, has a date of May 6, 1987, a Wednesday. It was a good break for us to do that, says Krist. According to Ryan Agar, Kurt certainly saw it as a step up. I think it was sort of the legitimacy of the show, he says. I know Kurt really didn't want to play in Raymond. He wasn't really happy about that. Kind of a constant theme throughout Kurt's career, to me, was that he was a little bit critical of his audience. He wanted to respect his audience, and his audience needed to be a certain caliber of character. And if he didn't like who was listening to him, it disturbed him. And I think that may have had something to do with the quality of the performance in Raymond. He didn't like what was going on there. It wasn't worthy. He was a little bit of a snob in that way. And Chaos was an entirely different thing. Chaos was exactly the kind of audience that he wanted. Despite striking him as, quote, tough kids from Aberdeen, John found Skid Row easy to work with. Chris was always a sweetheart, he says. Kurt was pretty quiet, and the drummer was this metal dude. He had a funny mustache. He was way more macho than anybody else, but they didn't seem intimidated. 'Cause it's so low-key at Chaos, it's super casual. It's goofy community radio stuff. There was just a little 6-channel mono mixer. There wasn't much of anything else there to even do a sound check with. John decided to record the show on tape. I was just super into it, which was why I committed to it on a 2-track machine. And even recording at high speed, which for somebody as broke as me at the time was a big deal. Then, I'd have it, and I could play songs later on other radio shows. It would be the second known recording of the band. The tape I made was from the production room, which was where the nice reel-to-reel machine was, John explains. So it's not a tape of the air feed. I would go in there and get everything ready and then go in with the band. And Donna would be doing the radio show. We had 4 hours, so she would be doing an hour of regular radio and telling people what was coming up. And then in hour 2, we'd cut over to the band live in the studio. There was no way to easily communicate with a band while they were performing, however. On the tape, you can hear some confusion, says John. Like, are we done yet? What do you want us to play? It was really like, they're in a 10 by 10 concrete room. and somebody's poking their head in the room going, "Come on guys, let's play another song." And that's all way off mic, super quiet. Then the band has to talk about what song to play, and then they play it. Those big gaps in between songs are college radio style dead air. Everything's turned way down because everybody's screaming and there are no compressors at a college radio station, which means there's no way to get a microphone level up to just talking in between songs, so everything dies down and it's really quiet. I turned up the vocal channel really loud to try and hear somebody talking about the next song, and then the first note of the next song would be incredibly loud. According to Aaron, Kurt chose the songs for the performance. He made the set list, although we probably had a little bit of a say in it, he says. It was mostly all Kurt's project. You know, these are the songs we're going to do. We just agreed. The set goes off to a good start with Love Buzz, already recognized as one of the group's strongest numbers, or maybe the fact that it was a new addition to the set list made it something of a novelty. The cascading guitar intro sounds much the same as it would when the band professionally recorded it a little more than a year later. Although at this stage, the lyrics have been distilled to the first line of the first verse and the sole line of the chorus, with Kurt taking great delight in shrieking out the word buzz. The song's 2 instrumental breaks allow for the usual playful guitar improvisation. The second break is especially twisted. But it's Kurt's voice that makes the strongest impression. On Love Buzz in particular, Kurt's drawling vocal walks a thin line between parody and seriousness, the kind of technique that Queen's Freddie Mercury was the master of. "Are we still on? What's with all the hubbub?" Kurt asks before launching into Floyd the Barber. Floyd is taken a tad slower than it would be in its final version, making it somewhat plodding here, although Kurt's glee in delivering the sinister lyric is obvious. Downer is faster than the Fecal Matter version, but again, not as fast as it would be. In contrast to the earnestness of Downer, Mexican Seafood swings with raucous fun, even though Kurt's vocals are buried in the barrage of sound. There is then another brief pause with Kurt again asking, "What, are we still on?" Before the suggestion is made to perform White Lace and Strange, which the band had first played at the Gesco show, the song races along with gusto. Indeed, the band invests noticeably more energy into this song than they do their original songs. Part of this was undoubtedly due to a lack of self-consciousness. Because the song was a throwaway, there was no need to take it seriously. Thus, the band relaxed and turned in a highly spirited performance of a song they'd never play live again. Spank Through continued the mixing of musical genres. Along with the hard rock of Floyd the Barber and the arty punk of Mexican Seafood, Spank Through was fairly unadulterated hard pop, albeit undercut by Kurt's over-the-top vocals, his drawl alternating with his stretched-out scream. The pace instantly changes with the charging guitar intro of Aneurysm, but while the verses are trademark heavy metal riffage, and most of Kurt's delivery akin to the yelping of Mexican Seafood, during the bridge the music suddenly takes a Melvins-like swing into something slower, and that melodic, hypnotic drone so much a part of Nirvana's sound is instantly recognizable. After a few tantalizing seconds, however, the song heads back just as suddenly into a more frantic terrain. Hairspray Queen sounds more confident in comparison to The Raymond Show, Kurt switching between the harsh, softer vocal delivery with ease, although his energy flags a bit over the course of the song. This is even more evident in Pen Cap Chew, with Kurt not even bothering to sing all the lyrics at times, instead screaming or moaning out nonsense syllables. "That's it," Kurt announces at the end of the song. But in fact, there was one more number, which unusually only featured bass and drums, with Kurt free associating a lyric, perhaps not dissimilar to the material he performed with Buzz and Dale at Gesco the previous year. A bootlegger entitled the piece, "Help Me, I'm Hungry," after a line in the song, which is how it was titled when it was later released on the With the Lights Out box set. White Lace and Strange and Aneurysm also appear on the box as well. Today, the track is known in trading circles as Vendetta Against, a deduction made from the fact that the phrase appears both as a lyric in the song and on an early Nirvana setlist. The very next day, we showed up for practice, and Kurt had this easel with a big sheet of paper on it, Aaron recalls. He drew a big picture of a pen with its cap all chewed up. That was our new name. We were Pen Cap Chew. That was kind of a weird transformation. I don't know where he got it from. Kurt also wrote the new name on his pink suitcase. "We had a new name every week. We'd get kind of bored of them," Krist explains. A rehearsal tape from this period survives and has 2 more new numbers in their only known performances. One was later entitled Mrs. Buttersworth when included on the With the Lights Out box set. It's an up-tempo, driving number that suddenly lurches into comedy in the middle during a spoken word section, the only such section in any Nirvana song. in which Kurt imagines himself selling trinkets at a flea market, an idea he'd return to later. The other number begins with a repetitive 2-note drone, which Kurt then imitates, the guitar lines spiraling up and down like a ball slowly going up in the air, only to come back down to earth. Largely instrumental, it may have been more of a jam than a proper song, and, in any case, neither it nor Mrs. Buttersworth were taken any further. The band's next show, at the Community World Theatre on June 27th, was indeed under the name Pencap Chew. After that, their momentum stalled. The band's only other confirmed show of the year was on August 9th, 1987, again at the Community World Theatre, this time under the name Bliss. Part of the problem was logistical. After the Chaos show, Kurt moved in with his girlfriend Tracy in Olympia. Krist and his girlfriend Shelley moved to Tacoma, and Aaron remained in Aberdeen. With the band members now living in 3 different places, they had to make a considerable effort to practice together. And with no regular venues other than the Community World Theatre interested in having them perform, there was no great incentive to make that effort. Everything just kind of fell apart, says Krist. Not until 1992, in the first flush of Nirvana's mainstream success, would every member of the band again be living in the same city.
All right, guys, so I am here with Aaron Burckhard, and we just happened to bump into each other on the road. Aaron, thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
Appreciate it. So, when did you first meet Kurt?
I met Kurt in '86. I lived across the alley from Dale Cobra, drummer for the Melvins. And I used to go to practice all the time. I was with Dale right across the alley. And that's where Kurt and Chris used to hang out there a lot. And Kurt and Chris showed up one day and asked me to play drums. I didn't have no drums, so we went out to my buddy Sam Layton and got enough drums. And we were set up in Kurt's living room that night.
That's so cool. You remember what the first songs were that you played with
Nirvana? Yeah. It was one of the first songs we wrote were, I believe it would be Floyd the Barber, Mexican Seafood, Hairspray Queen, Stank True. There was we did a couple covers. We did Thieves, Tramps, and Thieves by Sonny and Cher, right?
Sonny and Cher?
Yeah, and Chris sang that song.
So do you have a favorite song that you were involved with Nirvana?
Probably Pencap Chew.
Pencap Chew was your favorite
that was
one?
a second name also. Second name is the band. We already had the song called Pencap Chew. But then we played a midnight show. In Olympia, and the next day I told Kurt I'd come unload the gear in the morning. It was so late, and when I got to his house, he had painted the big. Is that Jillian? That's Jillian Garr. She's more famous than me.
Yeah.
Hi, Jillian.
The last 2 times I've been to Aberdeen, I was thinking about you. We were down at the landing, and I thought, gee, I should have told Aaron we were coming.
I met Lee, who bought the house, and he let me first.
Entertain Us is one of the best books.
But
well, thank you.
There's a few songs that you played on, like demos that are on some of the box sets, right? If I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Which songs are those?
Heartbreaker, Mrs. Butterworth, Hairspray Queen. Well, Incesticide, there's 5 songs on Incesticide that my lawyer is checking right now. That was drummer when they were created. Mm-hmm. A couple songs on Bleach.
When you're in front of this house, do you ever think about Kurt?
No, I didn't know Kurt when he lived here. I used to hear the guitar sometimes when I walked through the alley, but that was about it. But I knew Kurt when he lived over here. This house not there anymore.
Yeah, it's not. I checked it out this morning. Yeah, it's been demolished completely.
Yeah, it's been gone like 15 years.
Yeah, it's too bad.
But that's where Kurt lived the whole time I was jamming with him.
So how did you join Nirvana? Like, how did that begin?
It was at a Melvins practice. Kurt and Chris asked me to be the drummer. We were pretty tight, and we caught on fast.
If you'd be comfortable talking about it, what happened exactly? Like, how come you left the band?
They had gotten Dave Foster to play drums, and one day Chris called me up, and Dave was arrested or something, so they wanted me to join back in the band. So they came pick me up, and I hate telling the story because it's really
no, whatever you're comfortable with.
No, it's fine. And my dad's a merchant marine, so I left Kurt wanted to listen to our practice that night. So we went to my dad's, and my dad was on shift. So I left Kurt there, and I was just going to run up to the store and grab a 6-pack and come back. Well, I had been drinking all practice. It's not like I took the car and went up and got drunk, you know. I just stopped and had a drink, barely half a drink. Right? And boom, I was back in the car, but I was already drunk from practice, from drinking the practice.
Yeah.
And I got pulled over. Yeah, and I left Kurt sitting in my dad's place for like 4 or 5 hours. He didn't know what was going on. There's no phone, so I called Chris, and Chris came and got me because they were looking to release me. 5 hours later, the car got impounded.
Jeez.
And in hindsight, it's 2020. I tell you, if I would have known what was going to happen a year and a half later, I would have groveled. I would have groveled at his feet.
Yeah.
But as it was, he fired me then. That was the last straw.
So, if you don't mind me asking, when Nirvana really took off, how did you react to that? Like, were you like? Well,
everybody wants to think I was all upset and jealous. I wasn't. I was happy. I was thrilled to death. You know, because I was already, I was part of it. You know, and I was happy for him because I know exactly what he wanted to do, and he did exactly what he wanted to do. He hated all the metal bands. He hated that cock rock, I call it. He hated them guys. He hated the mainstream. And like Tom Petty said, one swoop with the sickle, farmer just cut them all down. And I know he loved that to death, you know.
Do you have a favorite Nirvana song?
Yeah, probably Drain You.
Drain You is your favorite one? So what was it like a Nirvana practice like in the early days? Like what was the vibe? Was it really serious? Were you guys goofing around?
It was serious. Bye guys.
Really nice to meet you.
Take care. It was serious. Kurt, we played when we learned the song, we played the same song over and over all day.
Did you ever like break anything when you were playing with them?
Yeah, I break sticks all the time. I'm a rock drummer. I hit him like they owe me money. I hit the drums hard, and they break sticks. But, you know, I can play with this broken stick until the next song.
So you mentioned you were friends with the Melvins too, right?
Yeah.
When Dale Crover was playing in Nirvana, did you have any contact with him? Like, did you know that he was in the band?
Yeah.
That's cool.
It was just we weren't anybody, you know, back in then. We'd play shows up at Olympia, you know, but there was nothing special about it. We were just rock band. We were a rock band, you know. That's it. And now you think of Nirvana now with the fame and everything, but back then it was, you know, we were just regular guys, regular band, you know. There was
cool.
Hindsight is 2020, like I said.
Yeah. Did you ever meet Chad Channing at all?
Yeah, I'm friends with Chad. Yeah, I've met him a few times.
That's cool. Well, do you remember the first time you met Chad?
Yeah, it was at we were opening for them at the Hope Eagles.
With Attica was opening for Nirvana?
Yeah, that's when I first met Chad. And they came by my house and hung out for a while. Yeah, that's when I met Chad.
So for you, what is your personal goal with music right now?
Just keep playing. I'm pretty. I still have my chops. I still play every day. You know, I play every day. I play my drums every day, and it's not so much. Maybe make a few bucks, but I can live without a few bucks. It don't matter. You know, I just did an interview with this film company from Berlin, and they're coming out with. It's called Rock Bottom, Songs with No Money. It's about musicians, 5 musicians. I'm one of them, and they, still chasing the dream, basically.
So, if I may ask, do you have any regrets from your time with Nirvana at all? What is your regret?
I regret stopping at that bar and getting a drink and getting pulled over. Of course, I regret that. I learned I was an alcoholic. I don't drink now, but back then, alcohol destroyed. It fucked up my, I probably would have been with them when they made it big. I probably wouldn't have got that DWI and switched car. But I can't change that, and I just got to live with it, and I'm good with that. I regret it. That's a very big regret. I regret stopping at that bar. On the way home, I shouldn't have. But what you can do, I can't change it. I just got to live with the present now, and I'm comfortable with being a member of Nirvana. There's 5 other drummers, It's like, but I'm the original. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, man. I really, really appreciate it. So we bumped into each other. I was at Cobain Landing at the bridge over there. You happened to be walking towards it. Do you spend a lot of time at the bridge?
Yeah, well, my band practice is right across from the park. That's where my drums are.
Oh, cool. What's your new band?
It's not new. It's an old band, but it's new. It's Attica, called Attica.